You're listening to Watching Trees Grow, a podcast by Troutwood. I'm Gene Natali, co-founder and CEO of Troutwood. And this is our second office hours series where we kind of follow along my journey teaching personal finance at the University of Pittsburgh, share observations from the class, but our objective in doing so is to help the Troutwood community who's not able to be in that classroom, maybe doesn't have the opportunity to take a personal finance course, benefit from what we're teaching and what we're learning. This was an exciting week. Partially the reason it was exciting is because the roads were really icy getting into Oakland for class. But we also started building our financial plans. So this was the week where pen went to paper and the students took that first very important step into building a plan. I'll preface, we tiptoed in. Last week, we challenged everyone with the question, what is a financial plan? And it was the first time many had heard even the term. So I think it's important we give an analogy there. If this is the first time you're hearing that term, financial plan, and maybe saying, well, why do I need something I've never heard of? There's a great deal of research across multiple platforms on the value of a plan in achieving goals. If you are in a high school or college classroom, I'm certain that your teacher, your professor has a plan for the school year. If you participate in a sport or an after-school club, I'm certain that your coach has a plan for that respective sport or club. So if your intent is to one day have a job and to make money in that job, at least in my mind, it makes a ton of sense to have a plan to maximize the probability of achieving your financial goals with the money that you make in that job. So we tiptoed into the plan and we started right out. And I do this every year. I say to my students, congratulations, you were just hired. $50,000 starting salary. Here is a blank budget. You graduated last week. You start on Monday, put pen to paper and build this budget. I then stay quiet for 10 minutes. Now, I haven't analyzed the results. We do this in Excel. Students shoot the report back to me. I do this for two reasons, and they're very important. I want to share both. Hired an entry salary, $50,000, start work on Monday. The two things I'm looking for in this example is first, what percent of my students consider the impact of taxes? Because a $50,000 salary is not $50,000 in spending power. I can tell you roughly 1/3, at least by the back of the napkin, raise your hand if you consider taxes. 1/3 of my students considered taxes. 2/3 did not. The second piece that I look for is, do any put savings as the first line item in their budget? This is a cardinal rule of Troutwood that we save first in our financial plans. And I like to just get a pulse of the class. Does anyone do that before we teach this concept? I had one student, and actually that is at least over the last few years, I've not had any students do that on day one. So I was really pleased to see at least one student, without having been taught, put savings as her number one line item. So that's the reason we do the blank budget. 10 minutes, students go through it, they turn it in. I'll be able to share analysis next week on how realistic the actual budgets were, but it's a great practice because it's very real world based. Let's be honest. Many of us don't have a personal finance course. We don't have a place to get this education. So we learn by trying and doing, which tends to be very difficult. After building that mock budget, and I should add that over the course of the semester, we are going to be building a very accurate and actual budget. So this was just step one in that process. But after the mock budget example, we began building our financial plans. So where do you start? If you're following along this journey and looking to also build a personal financial plan, we'll start with who you are. I'll give an example, and this is what we did today. I'll use myself 20 years ago as an example. Hi, I'm Gene Natali. I'm a senior at Allegheny College studying pre-med. I'd really like to be a pediatrician one day. Why? Well, I really enjoy working with kids. I've been a swim coach throughout high school and college, really enjoyed that experience and would like to continue doing so. How am I going to do it? I'll need to apply and attend med school to accomplish this objective. That's the first paragraph in a personal financial plan. For students that haven't graduated, it can be hypothetical, particularly for underclassmen. Maybe I have a student who wants to be a nurse. I'd like to be a nurse when I graduate next year. Here's how I'll do it. That's part one. The second part of that, who am I, is grounding that in reality. And that's a two-part conversation. The first part is if you have an actual job or an actual job offer, which many seniors do even at this point in the semester. That's great. Makes that next paragraph very easy. Sticking with my example as a pediatrician, in that case, I would have had to go to med school. Fast forward, I graduated med school. I'm starting here working for UPMC at a salary of X, Y, Z. Makes my financial plan real. If I'm an underclassman without a job offer, I stress this, use bls.gov or the Troutwood app where we source information from the BLS because it grounds you in reality. Too many students overestimate, the starting salary based on what's out there and available information on just the broader internet. I see that far too often. In 7 years of teaching, the number had been 2 until today. I had seen 3 students obtain a higher salary than they had modeled for. And I'm rounding up today because I had a student share an offer letter, and it was a very attractive offer. And he was very honest. So that was exciting to see, proud of him. So ground yourself in reality with a number that's based on BLS data, which is based on tax filings of that occupation in the zip codes you are exploring. So extremely important. Who am I? How am I going to do it? Then we have a little bit of fun because the first word in personal financial plan is personal. And after that basic introduction, each student listed 5 financial/life goals. I'll continue to use myself as an example. I'd like to have a cabin in the woods one day, pay off my student loans, open a Roth IRA, contribute the minimum to receive the maximum company match at my employer, and I'd like to get a job in the medical field. That'd be an example of 5 goals. 1 very personal with the cabin, and then 4 that were certainly financially associated. They will differ for everyone. I really stressed in class today the importance of this being personal. It's this goal. And for me, it is that cabin in the woods dream. That was a dream I've had from just a very young age. Every nickel saved is a 4th decimal point percentage of an acre. Motivation and inspiration is different for each of us. And that's where putting it on paper helps to make the plan and the goal real. There were smiles on students' faces as we were doing that part. I look forward to seeing those next week in class. I have not yet seen the goals we build over the course of the semester to avoid the cramming at the end of the semester. Just to kind of wrap up this episode, some class highlights upon conclusion of the workshop piece of it. I'm really pleased at how well this class understands debt, understands that debt is a legal obligation, and has the confidence to say, I'm nervous and I recognize there's more I have to learn to effectively pay off this debt. And I say that because in my mind, it takes confidence to admit publicly when we're nervous about something. The fears around debt are real. And I was really proud of the students that raised their hand and were able to talk openly in front of the class on that concept today. Next week equals week 3 of the semester of the class. We will be talking debt, all debt. So stay tuned. We'll have that in next week's episode of Office Hours. But I'm going to wrap up this episode of the podcast as well with the same challenge question that I concluded class with this afternoon. And it was kind of a next level question. This wasn't a basic personal finance 101. I would call this like a finance 404 type class. I asked, is anyone following the Fed's talk on interest rates? Hands did not shoot up, but two students ultimately did raise their hand and said, I have been following, Gene, and they're talking about wanting to raise interest rates. It sparked a small tangent and a very good dialogue on concept like what even is a basis point? Why does the Fed say I'm raising in basis points? I've never heard of the term basis point. For anyone listening, a basis point is simply it's 0.01 or 1% of 1%. So 50 basis points equals half of a percent. 100 basis points equals 1%, which the students had some good comments following that. But the challenge question was, if we're following headlines, and if the Fed is talking about raising rates and does raise rates to you, student audience, what do your student loans look like 1 year from now if you have a variable rate private loan? And that's where part of the class got silent, I think, as they connected the dots of that challenge question. I'll repeat it in conclusion here. What happens to your variable rate private loan if the Federal Reserve increases interest rates over the course of 2022? We'll continue that discussion next week when we dive into debt during office hours. Thank you for tuning in to Watching Trees Grow, a podcast by Troutwood.